gone live. Oh, here we go. Okay, now we're live. Great. Well, welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Account-Based Friday. Another repeat guest, a very special guest joining us, Terry Flaherty from Forrester, who's the VP and Principal Analyst of the Demand Services at Forrester. Really excited to dig in. Before I dig in, just to tee things up, first of all, as you can see in the upper screen here, actually, we've got two people from Serious Decisions, now Forrester, formerly Meg Hewer, who ran the research group at Serious Decisions. She and I have been doing these vlogs for about 3 years plus. If you click in the upper corner of the screen, you'll see, and depending on how the screen is mirrored here, in the upper corner, you'll see a QR code. That'll bring you to about 300 different videos of go-to-market best practices in and around sales and marketing. Meg and I have been doing a number of these with thought leaders and been asking questions. Of course, if you have a specific question, you can always ask us as well. But as far as how we tee things up, we usually dive into a poll and then we open it up for Q&A. The last thing I'll end with is if you have questions, feel free to drop them in on your LinkedIn, and we will promote those questions up. If StreamYard works properly, we'll promote the questions up. So it's your opportunity to ask Terry or Meg and I questions that might relate to today's topics of funnel, pipeline challenges, signal, change management, alignment. We're going to be talking about all sorts of things, particularly out of Terry's last experience. I think we talked to him before Summit. Now we're talking to him after the Forrester Summit, so he'll have some new insights. So let's dive into the weekly poll. And this week's poll, we tied to the question around alignment, and not a ton of votes here. I think it's summer season and end of quarter for a lot of people, but a question that came up in one of my conversations this week was, where do I focus my energy? And actually, it was a LinkedIn post I saw that really motivated me to do this. In addition to Terry joining us today, the LinkedIn post said CEOs didn't understand where they should focus their energy. They had no idea what the root cause was of a pipeline that might be not where it needs to be. And so that's what spurred this particular survey around alignment. The choices here between sales and marketing, ICP alignment, buyer motion alignment. Where should somebody focus if there's one area to pick on, or what's the sharpest challenge? Now, I picked other because I had a tough time picking across all three. Meg, I'm curious, how did you react to this poll?
I picked buyer motion alignment primarily because I continue to see a lot of companies want to sort of force fit buyers into the process they want or that they've built in their tech, as opposed to the reality of how their buyers make decisions, which is messy and nonlinear and involves lots of people and takes longer than we ever want it to. But the fact is, even if we don't like that, we can't, you still have to support it. So I picked that one. However, I'm also seeing a lot of evidence recently around ICP alignment being a big deal. So not surprised that also got some votes here. And I would even argue it's not so much ICP alignment. I think people agree philosophically on who they want to sell to. I think the problem is ICP consistency and focus and really sticking to what you said you want to do and who you want to engage, as opposed to when times get tough saying, well, we know they're not the best customer types, but we'll go after them anyway. And that becomes a slippery slope into all sorts of bad things. But Terry Flaherty, we are very lucky to have you here today, because I think you are one of the people who can really help companies understand the flaws in some of that thinking and really what to do about it. And we're just really thankful that you could take time to join us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here again, be back again. So it's been, 3 months, 2 months, three, or somewhere around that since the last time we chatted.
Yes, indeed. And curious to get your take. What do you think on this one?
All right. So I took you and I are in agreement, right? I did buyer motion alignment. I'm probably a little bit more radical and a little bit more extreme. In fact, I just published a LinkedIn post yesterday and did the controversial statement that says, focusing on marketing and sales and alignment is basically a waste of time. right? And I'm sure that like all kind of marketing leaders, it's like that's blasphemous. Like, how can you possibly say that, right? But my view is, we see it pretty much every client I talk to right now is saying, oh yeah, one of our big initiatives for 2025 is marketing sales alignment. And it's like, oh, that's nice, right? But the issue is, and when we think about, let's talk about alignment. Alignment is basically, we've got common definitions and stages and understanding of roles and responsibilities and service level agreements and metrics, and we're defining how we're working together, right? The biggest problem is that's an internal focused view, right? And especially if our process, if our revenue process is focused on leveraging MQLs, right? That is a drastically broken process, right? And so to me, it's a complete waste of time to try to align sales and marketing to a fundamentally broken process. And what I believe, right, is, so let's be frank, right? The current performance of the revenue process across most organizations is horrendous, right? And it's getting worse. And to me, the major cause of that is slightly influenced by internal marketing and sales alignment. The bigger issue is we're not aligning our process to the way the buyer's buying, right? And part of the factor of that is, our process very often is lead centric, right? We're leveraging leads and MQLs and all that. That is an extremely limited view of what's really going on in the buyer. It's based off of a technology and a process, just a concept that's 25 years old, right? And in those 25 years, there's been just huge dramatic change in the way that buyers want to buy, right? And so the buyer is in control, but an MQL-centric process doesn't recognize that, right? And it's not delivering. What the buyer wants now is, they want to conduct their research and get 65, 70, 75%. The numbers kind of immaterial, but they want to do, if we think about the buying process as research and then the purchasing, the buying process itself, and then ultimately the implementation, they want that research phase to be mostly self-service, right? And so what that means is, we need to help that research phase by delivering the optimal experience that we can around the signals that they're telling us about of what solution they're interested in, what stage of the buyer's journey do I think they're in, what role do I think they're playing, right? And if we're ignoring all those signals, then it's fundamentally broken. So that's why I say, focus on aligning your process to the way the buyer wants to buy, and then it's gonna be really natural on how marketing and sales and customer success and everybody works together. But if we're aligning to an old process, 100% waste of time, right? And like I said, I feel like I've stuck my finger in the bee's nest or hornet's nest. Everybody's like, holy cow, this is crazy Terry yet again with these wild thoughts. But it feels like all these stars are aligning, where that's kind of the reality of the world is, we're at this major inflection point, right, where our current process, and especially if it's MQL-centric, our current process is just, we have to get off of it. We have no choice. We have to get off of it. And if not, we're going to continue in this death spiral, right? And so I posted, I do all kind of LinkedIn posts, right? But I posted, a couple of weeks ago, or I guess last week, right, that, Salesforce made a big announcement, right? And Salesforce said, hey, we've had difficulty. This was their Q1 2020, FY 2025 performance, right? And they said, hey, it's getting harder and harder to win deals. And that's not a surprise to anybody. I think everybody agrees with that. And then Salesforce said, so part of our remediation on that is we've given guidance / requirement to our sales team that coming into the quarter, they need a 3x pipeline now instead of a 2x pipeline. And I think we'd all kill to go, 3x pipeline. We're probably way beyond that. Salesforce has the luxury of being so dominant. But that change from 2x to 3x pipeline, an increase in pipeline, that's caused sort of a, there's a Star Wars, there's a disturbance in the force or a ripple effect or whatever. But I've got all kind of calls now going, hey, number one, the requirement, the pipeline requirement has gone up. Two bad things happen. One bad thing is no salesperson wants to be on the offender list of not having 3x pipeline, right? So they kind of soften and loosen their definition of what I'm going to put in pipeline, right? Which basically says the quality of what they're adding in the pipeline goes down, right? Which is bad. The other bad thing is they go to marketing and say, hey, marketing, we need more leads, right? And oh, by the way, no more budget. Of course, no more budget. We need more leads. And so very often marketing's like, okay, I'll get you more leads, more MQLs. And what do? Right? They soften their definition of what becomes an MQL. So they hit their number. And so it's a spiral, right? Because getting that artificial 3x number, right? Quality goes down. And guess what's going to happen? Conversion rates go down. And 12 months from now, 18 months from now, it's like, oh, we got to do this again, right? And I'm sure we've all heard and seen this throughout our careers. It kind of is this vicious cycle. We can't do it anymore, right? And especially when our revenue process is based on MQLs, which is one person and very limited insight on that person, we got to change because just back of the napkin number says, if I'm focused on the MQL and the MQL is what I'm handing off, I'm probably ignoring 95% of the insight that's available about an opportunity and only worrying about that MQL, and that's what I pass off. But I miss all these other signals and all this other insight. And if I pay attention to those, right, I see way better performance in my process. So, my view, my response on we've got to increase pipeline and we got to increase MQLs is no, right? We got to increase efficiency. Right, because we can't buy our way out of this anymore. Right, we have this just horrendously inefficient process, and we have all this insight that's available to us that if we leveraged it, deliver incredible results. So, at some point, we're just going to have to stand up and go, we can't do it anymore. It's time for. We've kind of coined this new phrase coming out of Summit of revenue process transformation, right? And it's absolutely time for revenue process transformation because kind of maintaining our current status of, okay, we'll give you more MQLs or we want more artificial pipeline, whatever, that is, that it's kind of reached its maximum point. We're not going to be able to do it any longer and be sustainable. So I get a little emotional on this.
Well, it's a deep topic and understandably so. You said a lot of interesting things there. And before we went live, we were talking about there's a person, Matt Harney, who's a CEO of Cloud Ratings, which is kind of an aggregator of reports like Forrester and other reports. And he had mentioned he saw a statistic that 18% of pipeline in public companies were showing up as in ICP, like the pipeline consisted of 18% ICP accounts. And he was really surprised by that. And my anecdote back was, well, actually, I think that's somewhat normal because a lot of companies don't look at that very carefully. But what I'm hearing you say is that number may even go further south. And the focus right now should probably be in the funnel as opposed to widening the funnel. Am I hearing you right on that? Or
so let's talk about that because I think there's a couple different dimensions, right? And so let's look at the whole market to begin with, right? Let's say I'm a HR software vendor and I've got a talent management solution, right? And so, question number one is, and we're targeting these market segments and we can say, well, how many potential opportunities do I think exist for my talent management solution across these market segments and market accounts? And I could say maybe it's 100,000 potential opportunities, right? The bigger question is, of those 100,000 opportunities, how many of them are in either currently or going to be in market like in the next year, right? Not all 100,000 are going to be willing to buy. So I can stand there and go, hey, look at me. I've got this great solution. Isn't it wonderful? And they may be tied up in contract or they aren't in market. They're not looking at it. So, some percent of that market is in market and some percent typically a bigger percent not in market. And so one of the big debates then is, okay, marketing, what are you supposed to do, right? Are you supposed to be focused on accounts that aren't in market and trying to bring them into market? Or do we focus on driving the best optimized experience with organizations that are currently in market today, right? And my answer is we ultimately have to do both, but we're doing it differently, right? And so one of the challenges, I don't think any organization is going to go from I'm not in market to being in market based off of a digital ad or an email or a call from an SDR, right? It's just not going to happen, right? And so us trying to drive demand programs into the universe that's not in market is just an inefficient, expensive approach because I'm so dependent upon timing, right? The buy that client or that account has to be kind of at least aware and thinking about coming to market, and maybe I time my program and they'll come in market, but I don't want to be completely hidden from that market either. Some of these things like brand, right? And I'm gonna do brand and make sure that organizations are aware of us and we have a positive reputation and all that. But to me, the low hanging fruit is the companies that are in market today, right? And I'll come back to funnel conversion and efficiency, and if I think about like the relationship we have with organizations that are in market today, there's really three different types of relationships, right? Some of those companies that are in market, we have active cycles in. Our BDRs are talking to them, our salespeople are working the deal, so that's an active process, right? We also have what I consider kind of overlooked opportunities, right? And overlooked opportunities are, we got a signal that told us they're in market and we ignored it, right? And if I look in my database, we have all kind of people who were named people that raised their hand and identified themselves that never made it to an MQL, right? And the question is why? Well, because our MQL was a single person and 100 points, and a lot of our database didn't reach that threshold. But what we missed was, a lot of our database missed that threshold, but there were some piece of our database where we had 2 or 3 people from the same account who engaged, and they didn't have 100 points individually, but it's 3 people from the same account interested in the same thing. And holy cow, that's actually dramatically higher propensity to buy. But we ignored them, right? Because we're waiting for this magical MQL. And then, kind of the third piece of companies that are in market is what I call hidden, right? And these organizations that are in market, they're out researching, for solutions like ours. We don't know them, we don't see them, and they don't know us, right? And so all 3 of those, the common thing is they're in market, right? And the other common thing is even the organizations where we're doing active cycles, where we're BDRs and the salespeople are talking to them, we're doing a horrible job from an efficiency perspective and actually winning the business, right? And so to me, right, yes, we need to do brand. We can't deny that, and hopefully that brand will attract people into market. But the low hanging fruit is let's just do a way better job at leveraging the companies that are currently in market. We don't have to convince them to come into market. We just have to convince them that we're the right solution. Let's focus there, right? And that is, I think, I call it the low-hanging fruit, but I think that's the huge potential for organizations because, like I said, I don't have to convince them to come into the market. I just have to convince them we're the right one, right?
And Terry, I think you're raising some really important points. And you mentioned, the concept of revenue process transformation, and I really like that language. But anything with transformation in it means you need to convince people that there's a need to change and that what's on the other side of that change will be worth going through it.
Yep.
What are some of the ways you've seen marketing leaders or others inside companies get that buy-in for making the change?
Yeah. So I think the key, and there's probably 2 different paths we can go down on the answer, right? I think the first step is just engaging with them to even be considered part of the solution, right? And then helping them build the business case to drive justification on it, right? And so let's go first on just how do I get engaged in helping them sort of research and understand, is this something that I want to address, right? And so, like I said, if we think about the buying process as 3 phases, research is huge, right? And so one of the things we need to do to help support the research is engage with the buyer way earlier than we're doing now, right? And so, if I get like a third-party signal, a first-party signal, most of the time we're ignoring that today, right? And that's a huge mistake, because what I need to do is leverage those signals to say, hey, it looks like something's going on. They're telling me they're in market, and I need to support and help that buyer in that research phase, right? And my end goal then from a marketing perspective is not, I want to produce an MQL, right? Because if I produce an MQL and send it to the BDR, and the BDR tries to engage, the buyer, up until they finish their research, the buyer really doesn't want to have a sales conversation with vendors. They want to have an educational conversation with vendors for sure, but they don't want to have a sales conversation. And so what that means is we're really placing a lot more emphasis on marketing to help get that buyer through the research phase. And what that really means is the deliverable coming out of marketing is not an MQL, right? The deliverable coming out of marketing needs to essentially be a buying group who's done their research and understands how the strategy of how to solve the problem. And we've actually made the short list of vendors that they're willing to talk to, right? And so that means, we have to embrace signals way earlier. We need to understand what that signal is telling us, and then drive and act and engagement all around the buyer and the buying role and what their business needs are, and how we can help them kind of understand, yes, this is something that you need to address and change, right? And then, yes, this is something that's going to add value to your business, right? I think the second sort of question then is, so that's a change, right? And that's a radical change. How do I justify or get organizations to move from buying groups to or at least the buying groups and do revenue process transformation? And one of the things that's really exciting, the difference, this summit was just completely different, right? We've been talking about buying groups and opportunities now for 7 years, right? And when we first started talking about it, people thought we were crazy, right? Then people are like, oh, I kind of get it. This year, so the sessions that were on revenue process transformation and buying groups, all that, were by far the most popular. We had intimate roundtable discussions was one of the things we offered, and it was designed for 12 people. We had 150 people crammed around these tables. It was the hot topic, right? And we had 5. I had 5 sessions where customers talked, right, which was huge. And coming out of Summit, the main theme was, hey, we've been watching this for 5 years. It's been interesting, but holy cow, now organizations are doing it, and we're way behind. So we got to catch up. So it becomes, it's real. But the thing that's got me really excited, like I said, we've been like, oh, this makes sense conceptually. This is the right approach, and all this. We've been saying that forever. We're starting to see the results of this transformation, right? And just a couple data points, right? We think about these drivers of revenue and revenue process transformation. The one is just for deals that we're working actively, BDR and sales. When we're able, as an example, right? If we're able in the past off from a BDR to sales to hand them a buying group as opposed to a single person, then we can say, okay, how's that impact the win rate? Because in both cases, we're doing a discovery meeting, right? Sales is doing a discovery meeting. What's the impact of that conversion from the discovery meeting to close one, right? And what we're seeing is, on the low end, like a 25% relative improvement in conversion rate. So if our close rate from discovery to one is 10%, it bumps up to 12.5%, which is significant, right? But I've got multiple clients and some huge clients that are saying 275%, 400% improvement, right? And holy cow, right? That's hugely dramatic, and that ties back to, that's why I get so enthusiastic about we have to. It's not we can't buy our way out of this, but we have ways to improve the win rate by 25%, 50%, 400%. We should be really focused on that, right? And then everybody's like, okay, cool. I kind of get, right? You're passing 3 people. That means that the quality's gone up, the thresholds go up. What about volume, right? And what's fascinating is the immediate assumption is volume is going to go down because the threshold went up, right? But because we're looking at and leveraging every signal that's available to us, as opposed to, that only 2% of the people that come to our website at max are going to fill out a form, right? And maybe half of those turn into MQLs. So we're only really getting exposure to 1% of the activity on our website. When we leverage all of that, right, what we're actually doing is identifying new opportunities, either that were hidden in our existing database or overlooked in our existing base, or hidden in the market that we didn't even know about. And so I have organizations that are like, yeah, we're basically bringing new opportunities from our existing database where like 15% of the people that were overlooked we're elevating to active, right? We're not winning 15%, but we're bringing 15% more of that volume in as active sales cycles. And we're bringing in, 5% of the market that's been hidden from us. The key, right, is by making this transformation, making this transition, it's improving quality and quantity and having huge impact on revenue. So that's how we're selling this, or that's what people are buying now, is kind of this clear understanding of, we can't do what we're doing anymore. We got to change. The secret is efficiency and insight and leveraging all this incredible information that we just overlook, and that's such a waste, right? So I'll get off my soapbox. I think we're getting close to the end of the time anyhow.
Yeah, we're approaching time, but one more question on my side. You mentioned a lot about signals, and I'd be curious about the. I guess I'll make a statement and then a question around the trends. So I've noticed with signals in our ABX clients, because we do a fair amount of consulting in that area, there seems to be some indigestion of signals, like the sales team doesn't exactly know what to do with third-party signals, for example. Do you have either any advice, or have you seen any trends with first-party or third-party signals that would be worth kind of sharing?
So the most important thing you said, John, was they don't know what to do with them. Right. And signals sort of got the reputation of, it's a silver bullet. It's not, right? It's what I want to do is aggregate signals, right? And so, a third-party intent signal of itself is interesting, and I can send it to BDR or sales and go, hey, this is better than a completely cold call, right? But if I, for example, saw an MQL, right, and then said, hey, what else is available? And I could see that MQL has, 5 people anonymously, first-party intent that came on the website. That's a really good indicator there's something going on, as opposed to the MQL where there's nothing. The MQL where there's nothing, either number one, they don't represent the needs of the business, or they may be doing really early stage research. But in both cases, right, if I take that person and I give it to the BDR to qualify based off of that MQL signal, in that situation, they're not ready to talk to sales. They're going to blow off the BDR. They're going to ignore them, right? And so I think the key is signals are crucial. They're not the silver bullet in themselves, but it's how I use it and how I aggregate to really have the insight. That's the crucial thing, right? And so some signals, the response is, I'm going to put you in a digital program. I'm going to target you, right? Other signals, I'm bringing the BDR in, but it's just understanding what you need to do and how you leverage all the insight from those signals. Okay?
So Terry, I'm curious. Is this something that marketing should be leading?
Well, so number one, this needs to be collaborative, right? But marketing's role has definitely evolved and changed, right? And so marketing plays a much more significant role in getting the buyer through that research process into the shortlist than just producing an MQL, right? That doesn't mean that sales isn't involved in that piece, but what it does mean is the conversation that sales is having is not a sales conversation, it's an education and support conversation, right? So I would think, yes, the marketing is probably way more dominant and has more responsibility than before. But the other key point is, this needs to be a very collaborative effort all the way through the process between marketing and the BDRs and sales.
Yep. So maybe the word is collaboration versus alignment. I think that's the shift we want to make. And by the way, your office mate is adorable.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's Winnie. Yeah, and then she that's our favorite spot.
Aw.
Well, excellent. I think we're right at time here. So any I'll give you both last words here. Any closing thoughts, Meg, on your side?
I think we are at the beginning of an exciting time in B2B. I think the beginnings of exciting times sometimes feel kind of scary and messy and all those things that we don't like. But at the same time, I think the fact that people are opening their minds to re-examining the way that we're doing things to understand why they're not working. And then hopefully with enough, emphasis on the need to change, we will see that change. So I'm cautiously optimistic that this is actually the beginning of a great phase. But Terry, what do you think?
I 100% agree with what you said. Right. I think we're at an inflection point. I personally get excited just from a marketing perspective because I think, this is a big moment in time for the CMO, right? Because the CMO really should be the one standing up and, I forget the term I was using, but it's like the CMO needs to be the prognosticator, I think was what I was using. They're looking ahead and saying, holy cow, right? We can't keep on doing what we need to do. We were talking about somebody in a ship up in the crow's nest looking ahead going, oh my God, there's an armada of people, ships coming at us. They have to be looking ahead and saying, we got to do something, right? And I think it's the CMO's responsibility because so much more emphasis is in driving that self-service digital experience for the buyer. I think the CMO is a natural person to say, we got to change the process, but the CMO is not going to be able to do that themselves, right? The CMO is the trigger to form this cross-functional group. We call it the Revenue Council, but it's get alignment between marketing and sales and customer success and finance and everybody that touches the buyer. But it's get alignment to make this change or collaboration to make this change.
Yeah, I will build on what you just said. I think what you said was very prescient about it's the CMO's moment right now, and probably a reason why now we see more CROs that have been CMOs, maybe now more than 5-10 years ago. That was unheard of 5 or 10 years ago. And now you're starting to see a slight pendulum swing there. Of course, my favorite all-time CMO, who's now CRO, Lotney, is one of those, but there are several others. It's not just her. I've seen several others in that direction. And I think maybe the C-suite's taking what you just said a lot more seriously. So I want to thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and let's do it again in another few months.
Absolutely. And we're going to take a little hiatus for August. So Meg and I are going to be going dark. We'll still have some streams of videos dropping on my LinkedIn feed, some clips, some bloopers and that type of thing. But we'll still keep live for August in terms of those clips, but we're not going to regroup until September with live guests. So for those of you who have been joining us along the way, thank you for also joining us, and we will see you in September.
Thanks, guys. Everybody take care.
Happy Friday.